All right, let's take you back to our big story of the night, democracy or dictatorship. What is Zimbabwe's fate? Well, we continue our coverage as Zimbabweans prepare to go to the polls on Monday. Let's go to our guest in studio now. Gugu Ncube is part of ZANU-PF's Youth League. Joining us in studio. Gugu, thanks very much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
You know, we had these two guests from the Zimbabwe Solidarity Forum and a lot of criticism being leveled against your party, ZANU-PF, in the run-up to these elections, what should be watershed elections for the country. What's your response to how the party is perhaps handling the criticism?
Look, I don't believe that those criticisms are actually founded. Because if you look at it, MDC Alliance is led by people that specialized in constitutional law. And none of those leaders has ever gone to the Constitutional Court to challenge any decision made by the ruling party. So hence, we question the constitutionality and the basis, the genuineness of their allegations. Why haven't they gone to the Constitutional Court?
So the one criticism that I want to focus on is that this is the very same ZANU-PF that we had under Robert Mugabe, that there's no difference with Emmerson Mnangagwa at the helm. What's your response to that?
Look, that's your view that there is no difference, but there's a difference when somebody is being led and when somebody is now a leader. In my view, during that time, ED was being led. He was actually getting orders from Robert Mugabe. Right now, he is in charge of Zimbabwe. So in my view, we cannot compare a leader and somebody who is being led. In my view, at that particular time, he didn't have much saying. He didn't have that platform to call the shots, but now he has got that platform to call the shots. In my view, I think it's premature for Zimbabweans to actually say ED is a failure. He is, I wouldn't say he is a failure, he is not. Let's give the man an opportunity, and maybe after 5 years, then Zimbabweans can be in a position to say he is a failure or he is not.
But effectively, he was Robert Mugabe's right-hand man. I mean, we were discussing with the Zimbabwe Solidarity Forum, the issue of the Gukurahundi massacre is something that comes to mind immediately. Tens of thousands of people killed. And it was Emmerson Mnangagwa, who was Mugabe's security minister at the time, who found the addresses of the people who formed part of the opposition, the people who were eventually slaughtered. How do you separate the man from events like those and actions like those?
Right. If you look at it, there is nobody without a dead linen. That is ever, if those so-called allegations have got the basis to hold water on Emmerson Mnangagwa. Basically what I'm saying is, they are just claims, but who has come forward to come and challenge everything? When everything has been done and said, when Emmerson Mnangagwa came to South Africa in late last year, he made it clear to those people from Twagazi that were marching, demonstrating out of the Zimbabwean embassy in Pretoria. He said to them, look, you also have your issues, I also have my issues. The man admitted that there is nobody perfect. Google is not perfect. Why don't we let bygones be bygones and focus on working together, unitedly, building a new Zimbabwe? Nobody is perfect on this planet. That is ever, if there is anything that can be directly linked to him.
All right, let's talk about Nelson Chamisa, the leader of the MDC Alliance. He's young, he's vibrant, he has some incredible plans to get Zimbabwe. I read an article where he talks about planning a bullet train, I believe, between one point in Zimbabwe and another. He's got great ideas and great plans for what Zimbabwe will look like under his leadership. How does Emmerson Mnangagwa compare with someone of his age? He's got energy, he's got the time and the energy to travel. How does Emmerson Mnangagwa compare with that?
Right. It is your view to say Nelson Chamisa has got the energy. In my view, as a Zimbabwean, I don't think Nelson Chamisa has got the best interest of Zimbabwe at heart. Look at it. It went to Britain, asked Britain to remove the sanctions from Zimbabwe. The same opposition people that are claiming to be having the best interest of Zimbabweans, they went back to Britain. They asked Britain not to lift the sanctions from Zimbabwe. So now let's look at it. Who has got the best interest of Zimbabwe here? Yes, we understand all those promises that he is making. I can as well as wake up tomorrow and start making promises for Zimbabweans to vote for me. Number 3, I personally don't have respect for any man that has no respect for women. Nelson Chamisa went openly and promised to give ED his young sister should ED win the upcoming elections. I view that as a violation on any woman and a girl child. Being a woman and a girl child myself, I don't have any respect for such a man.
Let's talk about Zimbabwe's economy under ZANU-PF. Is it a different ZANU-PF that we are dealing with now? What kind of hope can we have for the Zim economy after these elections? I mean, these elections are set to be watershed. They're set to change the landscape of Zimbabwe. Certainly that's the hope of Zimbabweans around the world. Is that something that Emmerson Mnangagwa can take on?
Definitely. Emmerson Mnangagwa has been going around the world telling investors that Zimbabwe is open for investment. And I think the man has got the capacity, the man has got the potential to take Zimbabwe to a new Zimbabwe that everybody is looking for.
On what basis do you say that?
Because he is inviting the investors, the same investors that the opposition is chasing away. He is trying to say to the farmers and the Zimbabweans, look guys, the way the farms were taken from the farmers, it was not good. It's actually one of the factors that contributed to Zimbabwean economy slipping down. And now, the same opposition that is claiming to be having the best interests of Zimbabwe at heart is saying, no, the farmers cannot get the land back. So who exactly here has got the best interests of the Zimbabweans at heart? Because at the end of the day, Zimbabweans need food. Where are they going to get that food? From the farming. Zimbabwe has once been the breadbasket of Africa. We need a Zimbabwe that is going to go back there. We need Africans to also come to Zimbabwe to seek for survival. We don't need Zimbabwe scattered all over the world. We're tired of that. But how then do we move on? We need to be fair, and the land must be utilized in a productive manner that is going to benefit the Zimbabweans.
Guga, I want to talk to you about, let's perhaps just take a soundbite here regarding the economy, since we're on the issue of the economy. Some younger members of the public saying that the stagnant economy has caused this difficulty for innovators. I mean, you need innovation, and for innovation you need young people. Let's just take a listen to this soundbite that we have regarding startups in Zimbabwe.
Since Mugabe left power, I can't say there's been much of a difference in the number of startups, but there's been a difference in the activity, in the confidence that you then see. So there are startups that already existed, that were already working on projects, doing different things, and after the departure of Mugabe, we started seeing them now coming out, telling their story.
So there's, I think that Bart was saying that there's an increase in a different kind of startups.
Yes, there is actually an improvement. I don't understand what is it that Zimbabweans, actually the opposition to be specific, is looking for. There is improvement in Zimbabwe. There are some tenders that were given to young Zimbabweans. For example, the construction of the railway. It was given by the government to young Zimbabweans. Is that not what Zimbabwe needs? That's exactly what Zimbabwe needs for its engineers to come back and do the work at home. So what else is the opposition looking for?
But I mean, do you see Zimbabweans flocking back to the country under ZANU-PF? Is that what you see happening under Emmerson Mnangagwa, that will be a lure enough for them to come back home?
Look, Zimbabweans are tired of living outside the country. They are being exploited, manipulated, taken advantage of, abused and everything. Zimbabweans cannot wait to go back home under ED. I work with a number of organizations where there are a number of Zimbabweans. Zimbabweans cannot just wait. Look at when ED came to South Africa last year. Everybody flocked to the embassy. The embassy couldn't hold people. People were standing on the roads outside and everything, just to come and hear what he had to say to them.
So let's talk about the election. 60 hours or so to go until the elections, until the polls open on Monday. Already several questions around the freeness, the fairness of these polls. We have questions around how many ballot papers were printed, where the ballot papers were printed. A number of journalists tweeting from the country that they're seeing what looks like boxes of ballot papers being dropped off at certain points in Harare. There are a number of questions. What's your hope for free and fair elections, given the history of Zimbabwe's elections in the past?
I'll still go back to say, I've got a question for the opposition, particularly its leadership. Opposition leadership, most of them, they are constitutional lawyers. Nelson Chamisa is a constitutional law specialist. Welshman Ncube is a constitutional law specialist. Tendai Biti is a constitutional law specialist. All those brains coming together. Have you ever seen one of them going to the Constitutional Court to challenge any of the irregularities? None of them. What kind of leaders are they that are going to just claim? You know, if somebody is going to sit and claim that there is an irregularity, but they don't approach the court, we question their claim. Are they really genuine? Why are they not approaching the court? A neutral tribunal that is going to rule fairly. We question that.
So around the issue of ZEC, the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, there have been several appeals for them to print the voters' roll at polling stations. That appeal, to my knowledge, according to that press briefing that Nelson Chamisa had just a couple of days ago, to my knowledge, that still has not happened. The Electoral Commission in the country heading to the polls, can it be trusted? Or is it aligned to ZANU-PF?
ZEC is a neutral body.
Or it's meant to be a neutral body?
It is actually a neutral body, not meant to be. It is a neutral body. ZEC made it clear to the opposition that if they are not satisfied, they've got a right to approach the AU and the SADC. Have they done that? What is the outcome? Have they gone to court? What is the outcome of all those? We're talking about people that are just going to be claiming, but they are not going to be confident enough to approach the courts. Then where is the authenticity of their claims there?
But Kuku, before we let you go, just as a final question, is ZEC made up of former military personnel, former Zimbabwe army personnel?
ZEC is made up of Zimbabweans.
And some of them may have former military training, people who are trained to put country first.
ZEC is made up of Zimbabweans. Any Zimbabwean who applies for a position in ZEC, it's given to him or her.
To your knowledge, how many of them are former Zimbabwe military?
It's all mixed. It doesn't have necessarily to be a former policeman, a former military person, a former teacher, or a former whoever. Anybody who is Zimbabwean, ZEC is made up of mixed professions.
All right, we're going to leave it there for now. Gugu Ncube is from the ZANU-PF Youth League. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you for having me.
coming into studio. All right, we stay with this big story of the night, democracy or dictatorship? That is the question we're asking as we count down to Zimbabwe's election. And we continue our coverage now as people prepare to go to the polls on Monday, just 60 hours or so until the polls open on Monday morning. Well, eNCA's Aldrin Sampear is our reporter on the story. He joins us now live from Harare. With less than 4 days to go, we're counting it as 60 hours. It seems that everyone except ZANU-PF doubts the integrity of the electoral process. Now, these concerns have been raised with SADC Chair Cyril Ramaphosa. Before we go to Aldrin Sampear, let's listen to what the country's ambassador to Zimbabwe had to say.
Well, yes, there are issues that are being contested in terms of the technical aspects of the preparations for the elections. We have indeed received communication from the opposition, and we've passed their contestations in terms of the documents they've prepared to our heads of state and to our capitals. And so our capitals are very much aware of the issues. We've met the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, who have put forward their own explanations as to what is happening, and they've assured us that they have shown the ballot papers, the voters' roll to the opposition and to all the contestants, and that as the situation stands now, the situation is open to moving towards finality, and that there is no way that the elections can be reversed.
You mentioned the issue around the elections being reversed, and the MDC Alliance has also called for the for a state summit. Do you think that it might be a little bit too late to have a state summit at this point, considering that you less than 4 days away from the elections?
It is going to be very, very difficult for that kind of situation to obtain. As I'm saying, the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission have given their own explanation as to the situation, and they've indicated that some of the things are not possible to consider at this point in time, that given the situation, all is set now for an election.
All right, let's take you live now to Harare, where we find our reporter Aldrin Sampear. Aldrin, you had an in-depth discussion there. Just take us through, again, some of the issues that we've seen coming up time and time again as we count down to the polls opening. The issue of ballot papers, the issue of how many have been printed. We've also seen a number of reports on social media of ballot papers sitting in cars with ZANU-PF markings, ballot papers being delivered via plane and being dropped off. What are you hearing on the ground as we count down to Monday?
Well, certainly the MDC Alliance, amongst those opposition parties that have raised various concerns, as you've mentioned, the issue around the design of the ballot paper. They've also said that the process leading up to the elections have not been free and fair. And just in response to that letter that I asked the ambassador about, the letter that was sent to the president of South Africa, who's also the chair of SADC, and earlier on in Bindurura, where we had the MDC Alliance's presidential candidate who was campaigning in that area, journalists asking him about this letter that had been sent to the president of South Africa, then the chairperson of SADC. He confirmed the letter was sent about 2 weeks ago, and I just want to quickly read from that interview that he gave to journalists outside of immediately after that rally. He said that, and I'll quote him here, he says, SADC does not seem to be proactive. They want to react after the event. They want to see blood on the streets. They want to see blood. They want to see bloodshed. We are saying we don't want blood on the streets. Let's avert tension. Let's avert instability. Mr. Mnangagwa is determined to plunge this country into instability. Quite an emotive words that he has chosen there, considering what has happened back in 2002 during the 2002 elections and the 2008 elections, certainly. And many saying whether Cyril Ramaphosa, the president of the country, will respond to this letter, and if he does respond to this letter, whether he'll be able to give in to those demands, and one of those demands being that the heads of state of the SADC region meet for an extraordinary summit on Zimbabwe. But just a couple of days before the elections, not a chance of that happening. And the Zimbabwean Electoral Commission said on Monday already that the date has been set, the 30th of July, quote unquote, the deputy chairperson of the commission saying that the 30th of July is cast in stone.
And it's a strange thing, Aldrin, because Cyril Ramaphosa has been speaking to the media. He's been speaking on various platforms as the BRICS summit got underway this week. He's had 3 days of intense negotiations, of deal-making between the BRICS countries. He had those closing remarks just a few hours ago today, and not a word about the Zimbabwe elections or this letter sent to the SADC chair by the MDC Alliance from Cyril Ramaphosa.
Yes, and we actually asked Nicholas Bauer, my colleague who was covering the BRICS summit, to get to ask this question to the president, and he didn't get an opportunity to ask the question, but did put the question through to the presidency's office, and the presidency's office saying that they will not be commenting on this letter, but rather it should be SADC that comments on this letter of concerns or letter of demands that has been sent by the MDC Alliance. And Michelle, what we should take into consideration is this letter is very important because it raises concerns leading up to the elections of the 30th of July, also taking us back to what some may call the Kampempe report or the Kgang Moseneke report. The judges of South Africa back then, this is the Kgang Moseneke as well as Judge Sisi Kampempe, being asked by then President of South Africa, Thabo Mbeki, to observe the elections of 2002, and in their report, which was shelved for a couple of years, 12 years to be precise, only after 12 years did the Mail and Guardian eventually get access to this report after the President Thabo Mbeki fought against the release of the report, and the former President Jacob Zuma also fought against the release of the report, and the Constitutional Court eventually saying that the report must be released, and that report indicating that the elections of 2002 were not free and fair, considering the violent incidents that took place leading up to the elections, and about 107 people killed in the lead up to those elections.
Yeah, Aldrin, as you're on that topic, let's just take a listen to what the head of SADC's observer mission had to say.
It has always been, and will continue to be. So place the way it continue to be when you talk about objective.
Certainly, Aldrin, it raises questions around whether SADC has any power, but whether it has any political will. I think that's the more important question here.
This is very important, the response there from Antonio Tete, the head of the SADC mission here in the country. And the question that I asked him there was whether they have been able to assure the president during that meeting that they had with the president that they will be objective when they finally give their final report on their assessment of what these elections have been. And as you've heard there, he was quite clear that SADC has always been objective and SADC will remain objective, also saying that we should underline that issue around objectivity. But as we indicated yesterday already as well, that some members within the SADC region, quite specifically Botswana's former president, eNCA, was president then of the country in 2013, he said that those elections were not free and fair, even going to an extent of calling for those results to be audited. And one thing that we should be asking ourselves is whether SADC as well as the African Union will be able to regain the confidence of Zimbabweans when it comes to assessing these elections that will be taking place, crucial elections that will be taking place on the 30th of July, and an historic election, considering that you won't have Morgan Tsvangirai as well as Robert Mugabe on those ballot papers.
Yeah, for the first time since independence, Robert Mugabe's name not on that ballot paper. Thanks very much for that update. eNCA's Aldrin Sampear live to us there from Harare. Well, as we've heard, there are deep concerns over the integrity of the vote in Zimbabwe. But what is the official line? Well, coming up, we head back to Harare for you, and we speak to the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission itself. Plus, in other news, a live look at the lunar eclipse. South Africa in for a rare treat, as the moon is set to disappear in a way.